Brosif, broski. If you were watching this video, I just wanted to let you know that you're phenomenal, dog. Don't let anyone tell you different. Great minds do great things, and you're about to do something amazing today. Say it so it can happen. Also, it's Tier List Tuesday. What's going on with y'all, big dog? And it is an amazing day for Yu-Gi-Oh! I hope that your day, phenomenal. But if it isn't, keep in mind what I just told you, man. You are amazing. So go out there and make it phenomenal. I know one thing's for sure. Now that we have all of the cards confirmed from Amazing Defenders, unfortunately, it's not a phenomenal set, but there are some hidden strategies that got a boost from it. And today, we're going to be reassessing what I think about those 3 strategies from Amazing Defenders, but also talking about some other amazing rogue strategy. In our meta tier list last week, we compared how strategies would do very well against some of the best decks. Rogue, I think we actually need to compare these strategies to what they do against certain trends. If you're picking the correct rogue deck, you can absolutely crush some of the best decks in Yu-Gi-Oh! The only thing you do need to watch out for is certain cards or engines that everyone is playing, and in this particular tier list, we are going to be addressing that post Amazing Defenders. Of course, big dog, if you want to see more content like this, then be sure to destroy that subscribe button, but also be sure to hit that notification bell if you want to be too strong. Okay, guys, I'm hitting myself in nostalgia. I've not done that in so long, but make sure you hit that subscribe button. We're trying to get to 150,000 subscribers. So you're probably wondering, big dog, what exactly are we going to be basing this tier list on? Well, over the course of last weekend, which did include YCS Sidney and a couple of regionals, there's a couple of cards that have stood out to me. Of course, it's going to be the Bystials and Ishizu cards, which are running amok in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Card game, but I also noticed that a lot of rogue strategies or other decks had a chance if they played the Bystials themselves and gain advantages from them, or if they use effective hand traps. Also, if they could play Ishizu cards, that would be extremely beneficial, shuffling back in your opponent's cards, or if they played Floodgates but not a lot of back row heaviness, meaning that your opponent would hesitate to side in some of those back row removal cards, or if they could play back row and protect them. We're going to be basing all of these strategies over can you play those cards, can you play against these cards, and of course, how good your strategy is. Starting off with Weather Painter, a deck that is based on being able to get weather cards into your spell and trap card zone, and then being able to use your monsters with those weather cards as effects. Unfortunately, not only are the weather cards not really powerful enough to be able to keep up in this format, also, the deck is back row reliant no matter what, meaning siding in that back row removal can be detrimental to the strategy. I do like how you could win game 1 if you go first and play some of those Floodgates. Dimensional Fissure is a card that could be played inside of this deck. Same with Skill Drain, which is really good against some of the top strategies, but unfortunately, this deck is pretty much power creeped at this point in time. Almost the exact same thing with Crystal Beast, except you're almost guaranteed to be able to search a Floodgate through Necro Valley with this strategy. The biggest problem with Crystal Beast is while it is a deck based on being able to place monsters into the spell and trap card zone, you really only have 2 good Crystal Beasts in the entire deck. The other Crystal Beast monsters are not necessarily good. This deck doesn't have the strongest opening turns other than search and activate Necro Valley, and I think that that's the biggest problem with this particular deck. Once its first turn boards get fixed, it'll be a way better deck than it is right now. Now, Dragon Maid is a strategy that does have a little bit of a problem with Ishizu, and also could have a problem with Bystials, but the cards that this strategy can play, oh my god. Since it is a dragon strategy, the Bystial cards work in perfect synergy with it, allowing you to be able to search any Dragon Maid monster from your deck to your hand. But what I think gives this deck a little bit of an edge over some of the other strategies in this tier list is that it actually can get rid of your opponent's threats without sending it to the graveyard, which can trigger it. Being able to use Heretic Seal of Heavenly Spheres, which will also get you advantage, and even a potential Bystial monster, which is a free search, or your Dragon Maid Tidying to be able to bounce the Bystial monster and then use its effect is amazing. This deck is actually extremely good into Yu-Gi-Oh right now and has so many favorable matchups. Now, Drytron was a strategy that players really wanted me to put on the tier list, and unfortunately, I don't have a favorable review. I think that this strategy takes a ton of effort. Drytron is a ritual-based deck built off of tributing and summoning light monsters from your graveyard and hand to the side of the field. The huge problem with that is that when you use these Drytron monster effects, you cannot special summon monsters that can be normal summoned or set, meaning that you can't play the Bestials. You also lose to the Bestials and the Shizu cards. I really do wish that this deck could come back into Yu-Gi-Oh, but right now, it's just not happening. The exact same reasons why Drytron is a hit extremely bad, this deck is as well. The Bestials and the Ishizu cards completely tear this deck apart. It also is a strategy that is power crept out of the world into this Yu-Gi-Oh card game. I do like that it can play effective hand traps though. Exo Stepsister is going to be our first strategy that is going to be top rogue. This Exceed based deck actually gains advantage when your opponent uses Bestials and Ishizu, and there's not many times where your opponent wants to use Bestial and Ishizu against you. It can play effective hand traps, and it also can play floodgates, though it doesn't need to, but I think this deck's best draw is its ability to be able to summon boards that can OTK your opponent, essentially giving you a Necro Valley deck that can actually end the game quickly with its cards. Fur Hire topped the regional over the course of this format, and I think it's a deck that requires a lot of effort. I want to put it in a really good pilot, but when you look at Fur Hire, it has so many weaknesses. Yes, we know that the Bestial monsters won't affect you unless you're trying to summon your best monster, which is Raphael from the graveyard. The Ishizu cards can actually hurt you a little bit, as you can shuffle cards back into your opponent's deck at the wrong time before they want to use them. But the biggest problem with Fur Hire is that you will need a Fur Hire monster in your hand and another Fur Hire monster in your hand, and you know that all your opponent has to do is stop your first Fur Hire summon. If this deck had a monster like, or a card like Emergency Teleport, maybe 6 copies of them, this deck would probably be bonkers. As if your opponent did stop one of them, you can just E-Tele out another one and keep playing, but that seems to be the main hit of this deck. I understand that there's a spell card called Mayhem for Hire, which helps you mitigate this, but the problem with that is you need 2 Fur Hire monsters and the spell card consistently, while your opponent only needs 1 disruption to your monster for Hire. Heroes is easily a really good Yu-Gi-Oh deck. I think that it trades neutral with both the Ishizu and Bestial cards, and this deck is extremely good at being able to summon monsters like Master Hero Dark Law and Destiny Hero Plasma. I think it's also a pretty good going second OTK type deck that can take full advantage of effective hand traps that people are not watching out for, like Nibiru. Infernoble did get support from Amazing Defenders, though indirectly. It also got some reprints. Players have also been trying to mix Infernobles with Makanko, as well as trying it out with Rescue Ace, seeing that the Makanko plays equip spells and Rescue Ace plays or is a fire deck. I think genuinely, and the Infernoble players may hate me, but it's casual. This deck is completely power crept. Like, these decks got support that makes them a little better, right? This deck is just like, its whole style is revolved around a Yu-Gi-Oh style that doesn't exist anymore and can easily be destroyed by simple hand traps. Also, one of the better versions of Infernoble plays Phantom Knight cards, which just so happen to be dark monsters. The Ishizu cards can shuffle in your important Phantom Knight Infernobles, but I guess your Phantom Knights too. It doesn't play effective hand traps since the deck is built on all gas and no brakes most of the time. This deck, in my opinion, is casual, but is a really fun and cool looking deck. Maybe with some potential, maybe some more Infernobles come out in the future and that changes. Libromancer is another strategy that got support from Amazing Defenders, though indirectly. I personally think that Libromancer is really, really good. The reason why is because Libromancer does what Infernoble wants to do with less restrictions. You don't need all of these amalgamation of cards, and it's also a deck that isn't ultra reliant on its graveyard, so the Ishizu and the Bestial cards at best trade neutral. It can play effective hand traps and isn't an all gas, no brakes type deck. This actually might be one of the top rogue decks, maybe even one of the top decks to be able to get support from Amazing Defenders. Earth Machine is ironically an Earth deck that gets hit by Bystials. When you want to summon your best monster in Machina Ruin Force, that can be a Bystial problem, and the Ishizu cards can get in your way. I think the best way to play Earth Machine right now would either be the Vernal Sylph variant, as the back row variant could get clopped up in the sideboard with those board wipe cards. I think you're going to have to be a very skilled Earth Machine player, but to be honest, this deck's skill cap is a little bit too high for what it's going to give you, which is the draw 2, but it is extremely rewarding. A deck that I do think fits almost all of the criterias here is going to be Marincess. Now, Marincess is incredible. One card link summons for full combo, meaning that you can play all of the effective hand traps that you want. It actually does play Floodgates, but doesn't play enough back row for your opponent to want to side in those cards, so the Floodgates can be complete wins. The only drawback is that this deck can't really play Bystials as effective, and the Ishizu cards could hit you at the wrong times sometimes. I think that this is one of the better strategies in the game right now, and trades nice for the particular meta. Mech Knights. Guys, I really don't want to do this to my Mechy boys. The deck that is built on being able to place cards in the column and special summon it. Unfortunately, my Mech boys got to go in casual. Nothing really goes right for this particular strategy. A lot of times if you're playing the pure version, you want to go second, which is not a great spot to be in. This deck feels extremely power crept, just like how Infernobles feel extremely power crept. And on top of that, the Ishizu and Bystial cards hit this deck hard. Makanko, we have actually been able to do a lot more testing with the strategies post Amazing Defenders. I think that Makanko as a pure deck is not good. The best way to play Makanko is as an engine using that Ritual card, possibly in the Libromancer deck. Actually, Libromancer does it best because it easily searches into that card and provides a snatch steal on your opponent's turn. And as we know, being able to get rid of your opponent's card without putting it in the graveyard is the best way. But Makanko is a pure. I've seen a lot of Kaiju Makanko decks running around trying to OTK your opponent. It's admirable, though maybe it's just the builds that I've seen going around. I do see a little bit into it, as it does play a little bit different than most decks in Yu-Gi-Oh, which does give it an advantage, and it doesn't seem too weak to Bystial cards. So this could be a lot of effort, but maybe a deck that you really want to play, so it could be it. Ninjas right now, pre-Photon Hypernova, I would say 100% casual right now. This deck is built on being able to transform your ninja monsters into other monsters, and is a flip effect based deck. It already feels like a slow deck, seeing that you gotta play trap cards and flip effect monsters, but when Photon Hypernova comes out, this deck does get a lot better. Now, I was supposed to actually include Orcust in my last tier list. I completely forgot. My guy at Regionals that topped with Orcust wanted me to include it, and here we are. I think that this deck requires a lot of effort. So the best way to play this deck is probably using Tier Limits cards, probably using Punk cards, probably using whatever you can to get this, and it's literally a small engine as opposed to a deck. Though as an engine, the Orcust engine could be pretty favorable if you're playing dark cards. The only problem is the Bystials and Ishizu cards completely destroy you when used correctly. Predaplant is actually in the really good category. Super Polymerization is making its rounds as tier limit players are starting to mainboard Super Polymerization for the mirror match. Well, Predaplants can not only play a tier limit hybrid, maybe even a Destiny or a branded hybrid. It's such a hybridy deck, but the difference between these two decks is that it actually gives you the benefit of being able to search cards like Super Polymerization while not locking you into a particular attribute. Punk is also a strategy that is really good right now. It trades in fairly nice against the Ishizu and Bystial cards, and it can also play Bystial cards extremely well. And the best part about Punk is that you're drawing so many cards from your deck to your hand, you can draw effective hand traps and the Bystials to be able to stop your opponent from playing. Pearly, a strategy that got more and more, like way better, the more I played this deck. I think Pearly as a Pearly Sprite variant is top rogue. I think that it's ridiculous. Pearly as a regular deck, I think it takes a really good pilot. The Pearly feels like Sky Striker. It has like so many Sky Striker vibes. because activating multiple spell cards and then getting 1 card Exceed summons is really good. And for the players that are wondering, the reason why the Sprite cards work so well with Pearly is because for some reason, the monsters are ranked 2. And on top of that, Sprite double cost allows you to be able to disrupt your opponent and attach. So I'm going to go ahead and put Pearly in top rogue if you're playing top Pearly Sprite. I think that may actually even be a really good deck, possibly one of the better variants of Sprite. It has that potential. Now, the Rescue Ace deck. Yo, talk about power crept on arrival. This deck loses to any 1 disruption. And even when things go completely right for this deck, it doesn't have a follow-up. So a lot of times you just sit on your Rescue Ace Turbulence, and that's pretty much it. It's not a great deck right now. I think maybe as a variant or a hybrid, it'll be a little bit better, but not right now. It's not really working. Now, Rika is actually a fairly good strategy. I think that the Ishizu cards will hurt a lot because sometimes you need those plant monsters in the graveyard and they get shuffled back. But other than that, it is a deck that can use effective hand traps, and it doesn't necessarily need a floodgate when you have your Rika Gongon to be able to tribute your opponent's cards. But the big problem with this is that some of those similar disruptive cards that can stop a lot of the top decks also stop you from playing Yu-Gi-Oh from time to time. Solomon Great, guys, I feel like the sun has faded on Solomon Great, and this is one of my favorite decks. But even playing it in Master Duel, which doesn't even have the power creep of the TCG, this deck feels incredibly power crept. There's just way too many situations where, I'm gonna put it in a lot of effort. There's way too many situations where your opponent just has better cards than you and you just aren't in a favorable situation. Same thing with Sky Striker. I think that Sky Striker will probably need some other cards to be able to make it a little bit more competitive. Linkage does come in Master Duel, so that could be a thing. I think with Sky Striker Runic, it's a strategy that's a little bit better, but unfortunately you do get the worst of both worlds. The Runic cards prevent you from going into the battle phase, with the Sky Striker cards kind of need to do with Hayate to get their cards in the graveyard, but overall, it's not a bad deck, and it does take the correct player. Thunder Dragon actually topped YCS Sidney, which is crazy. It was a Thunder Dragon tier limit build, though the Thunder Dragon cards actually do work very well on their own. If you guys have not seen my archetype analysis on Thunder Dragon, go ahead and check it out, as it is a really powerful going second deck that doesn't care about the Bestials, and being able to shuffle in the Ishizu cards don't hurt it. On top of that, the Bestial cards help this deck tremendously, and an entire Bestial package is really good for this deck. Dino, I would 100% put in It Takes a really good pilot. The biggest reason why is because Misk is at 1, and with that, it really sucks following up on those next turns. You're going to really hope to try to OTK your opponent, and then if Misk does get disrupted with a Bestial card, you're not in a great spot. Umi Control is, in my opinion, a extremely good Yu-Gi-Oh deck. This deck actually can play those back row cards and protect its back row cards with C Stealth Attack. And also, Karyushin is a walking floodgate monster that prevents the opponent from playing Yu-Gi-Oh! It has some favorable matchups against Ishizu and Bestial, since it doesn't need its graveyard, can play effective hand traps and floodgates with back row protection. Zodiac has actually been making its rounds, which so the theory of this deck is to go second and make Divine Arsenal AA Zeus. The problem is Zeus is not that good. Zeus is not an amazing card. It's a good card in a lot of situations, but sending from the field to the graveyard is not always beneficial for you. And if that is your one trick pony for this deck, surrounded by a ton of hand traps, well, your deck's going to be pretty easy to crack, where all the opponent needs to know is if they simplify the game and prevent you from going into your Zeus, you're not going to do too well. And then Madolche is on here because we had it on our meta tier list, but I gotta say, after watching a player top with it, I was actually wrong about this deck. This deck can play the Ishizu cards. It doesn't necessarily gain a lot from the Bestial cards themselves, but it can play the Bestial cards fairly well. It does play, or it can play Floodgates and even search it through the Madolche Butterlusk, which can search Zombie World or a Necro Valley, which could shut down some of the top decks. Madolche is not a bad deck by any means. It's actually one of the better rogue decks, as it has so many things going for it, being an earth deck, meaning almost immune to the bestial monsters. The Ishizu card, shuffling it back into your deck, could benefit the Madolche strategy. It's pretty good. But that's all that I got for my rogue tier list. Let me know what you guys think about it. If you have any disagreements, let me know down below in the comment section. And of course, if you want to see more amazing CaliEffect content, be sure to check out these videos, as I'll catch you on the next one.